Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at the suggestions passed to the developers for November of 2024. In this video we're going to be having a look at the ground stuff, and to be honest there's been quite a lot of nice stuff passed this time. Usually the last few months of the past developers of the year is actually really cool, and this one is no different. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe and also like the video. Let's get started. The first vehicle is for America, and it's the M551 A1 TTS. This is an upgraded Sheridan, which we already have in the game, but the upgrades are the interesting part. Basically, the upgrades start in 1971 with the M551 A1 upgrade. This added a laser rangefinder, which improved the vehicle's first hit accuracy. Then development of the M551 continued into the TTS version, which was continued through the 80s. This sought to improve the scouting capability and also acquisition of the vehicle by adding an FLIR optic for the gunner. The thermal sight on the M551 TTS was the same as the one on the M60 A3 TTS, and the first TTS Sheridans were accepted in 1989 and participated in the Panama and Gulf War conflicts. The TTS Sheridan served actively in the US Army until 1996, and then these vehicles would continue to perform in the OP4 role until 2003, when the remaining vehicles were scrapped or then sent to museums. None of them were exported. So basically this would be a thermal-sighted Sheridan with access to a laser rangefinder too. The next vehicle is the FV101 Scorpion CVR. This is a British armoured reconnaissance vehicle, sometimes designated as a light tank, depending on who you chat to, which is based on the ubiquitous CVRT chassis, manufactured by Alvis for both the British Army and also other clients, with it serving with the British Armed Forces from 1970 to 1994. And over 3,000 units being produced, making it arguably the most successful variant of its family of 7 armoured vehicles. It's also worth noting that the Scorpion holds the Guinness World Record for the fastest production tank, recorded doing 82.23 kilometers an hour at the Kinetic Vehicle Test Track in Chertsey, Surrey on the 26th of January 2002. The origins of the Scorpion are directly linked with the Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Tracked family of vehicles, which called for an armoured fighting vehicle that could be rapidly airlifted to troubled spots. The initial intent for the project involved creating a vehicle with both a gun and anti-tank missile capabilities, but this was not possible due to the design weight constraints to retain air portability. The weight limits created a necessity to use aluminium for the hull, and to use the adapted car engine for a power plant. The direct anti-tank capability was offshooted into a dedicated vehicle known as the Striker, whilst what manifested as the Scorpion would use a 76mm gun for the fire support role. In 1967, Alvis was awarded a contract to produce 30 CVRT prototypes, with vehicles P1 to P17 being the Scorpion prototypes, which were delivered on time and also within budget. These prototypes underwent extensive hot and cold trials in Norway, Australia, Abu Dhabi, and Canada, resulting in the vehicle seeing adoption in 1970, with a contract for 275 being placed, which would later rise to 313 vehicles. These production vehicles would be completed in 1972, and would see their first deployments with the Blues and Royals for the Household Cavalry in 1973. Alvis would ultimately build more than 3,000 Scorpion vehicles for the British Army, Royal Air Force Regiment, and the export market. Like the rest of its CVRT ilk, it would retain its air portability, with 2 Scorpions able to be carried in a Lockheed C-130 Hercules, and this capability would see it deployed in multiple conflicts during the Cold War. A bonus to this low weight also resulted in the Scorpion having a low ground pressure, something that served it well in the boggy conditions of the Falklands War. The Scorpion, as previously mentioned, was armed with the low-velocity 76mm L23A1 gun, which could fire a high-explosive, HESH, smoke, and also canister rounds, with storage on board for 40 or 42 rounds. This cannon was supplemented by a 7.62mm coaxial L7 GPMG, along with 2 multi-barreled smoke dischargers mounted on either side of the turret. The main gun had an elevation of 35 degrees and a depression of 10. The turret has a full 360 traverse, and the traverse was hand-cranked as a cost-saving feature, making the turret initially slow and laborious, making it unsatisfactory, and this would be later rectified with vehicles as part of a life extension program. The vehicle was propelled by a Jaguar J60 Mark 100B 4.2-litre petrol engine, but as series production and life extension programs took effect, it would later be fitted with either a Cummins or Perkins diesel engine, giving it a maximum speed of about 50 miles per hour, with a 0 to 30 miles per hour of 16 seconds. The vehicle was also amphibious with preparation and had an aquatic speed of 3.6 miles per hour. This speed came at a cost though, and at a mere 8 tons, the armour was not as thick as one might desire, with only 12.7mm of sloped aluminium armour, giving the Scorpion an average effective thickness of 25mm. This gives the FV101 an all-round protection from shell fragments and 7.62 rounds, with the front resistance of 14.5mm rounds fired from 200 meters. The vehicle is also fitted with MBC protection, image intensification sights for the gunner and driver, and the aforementioned floating screen for amphibious operations. The tank also has certain crew comforts, such as a bog under the commander's seat, an internal water tank, and most importantly, a boiling vessel for cooking and heating the water carried aboard. The vehicle would famously see action with B Squadron. Blues and Royals were airlifted and deployed into the Akrotiri and Dhekelia sovereign base areas during the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1974. The Blues and Royals would also see service in the Falklands War, where they were used in tandem with scimitars, with the duo being the only armoured vehicles to see use by the British during the conflict. Scorpions would also see service in the First Gulf War, part of Operation Granby, where it served well in the force reconnaissance role, acting as the spearhead for the British push into Iraq. Then we have for Japan the M24 ATM. This is of course the Chaffee, which was equipped with the 4 Type 64 MAT missiles. The Type 64 MAT, also known as the 64 MAT and KAM-3, went into service in 1964 and was designed to be launched from jeeps. However, in combat, a jeep with no armor would not fare very well against enemy tanks. Consequently, the Japanese self-defense forces planned for an armored, dedicated anti-tank guided missile carrier. The M24 Chaffee entered service with the JSDF in 1952, but was eventually replaced by the M41 Bulldog in 1961. As the M24 tanks were gradually phased out, the JSDF's Technical Research and Development Institute retained one M24 Chaffee as an experimental ATGM carrier. Alongside the M24 ATM, the TRDI was also developing the SS4 ATM, a prototype Type 60 SPRG equipped with 2 Type 64 missiles. The M24s were completely outdated in the 60s, but the 75mm was still sufficient for soft targets, and the armor was still able to stop machine gun fire. Unfortunately, the project didn't go anywhere, as the M24 with the added ATGM launchers was way too tall to hide behind cover, and also it didn't make a lot of sense to keep and maintain a vehicle that was being actively phased out. The M24 ATM was later succeeded by the Type 60 ATM, which is kinda sad when you think about the game. We have another moped with a gun. This is the Type 40 recoilless rifle on a Mitsubishi C25 scooter. In late 1949, the US gave the Republic of China in Taiwan the plans and examples for the M20 or T21 75mm recoilless rifle. With this, they created their own domestic version, the Type 40 75mm recoilless rifle, produced by the 61st Arsenal. At first, they didn't have the manufacturing capacity to create new barrels, so they used leftover 75mm barrels from the M10 tank destroyers they had converted into 105mm SPGs. They also didn't have the capability to properly manufacture the shells for the gun at first, so they converted Japanese 75mm Type 94 mounted artillery shells and US 75mm mounted artillery shells to use as ammunition. Eventually, they gained the manufacturing capabilities to domestically produce the intended barrel and shells of the M20. Taking inspiration from the French's M20 75mm recoilless rifle mounted on a Vespa, the ROC military decided to do the same. The main scooter type they seem to choose is the Mitsubishi Silver Pigeon C25, which the Joint Logistics Arsenal in Taiwan heavily modified. The gun is seated underneath the seat, and it seems like it can carry 2 to 4 extra rounds. On the 14th of December 1950, there was a demonstration where jeeps and scooters mounted with recoilless rifles showed off their capabilities. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any videos or images of this demonstration. The 75mm scooter was eventually phased out, as the user had to get up close to enemy armor to accurately fire the gun, and at the time, Communist China obtained more heavily armored tanks than the 75mm recoilless rifle could not reliably penetrate. For Italy, we have the OTO OF24 Tifone. This was an Italian IFV developed by the Italian company OTO Melara during the Cold War. Its development started in the 70s after the Italian army bought a single Moag Tornado for evaluation. OTO Melara studied the Tornado and made the Tifone that was heavily inspired by it. The first planned version of the Tifone was equipped with a single 76mm cannon and a 7.62mm coaxial machine gun in the turret, which happened to be the same as the FV101 Scorpion. The second one, the Mark II, was equipped with a single RH-202 20mm cannon, which is the same turret as mounted on the Fiat 6616, and the third version, the Mark III, was armed with two 20mm RH-202 cannons. The Tifone hull was large and allowed to carry a total of 6 infantrymen, plus 2 operators, for the two 12.7mm machine guns on the back. At the end of the 70s, probably OTO Melara stopped its development, given the fact that the Italian army never ordered neither the Tornado or the Tifone. The French get the Automateur Garnier Renault, or the ACL-75GR. This was a development that answered the interest of the French army to develop a self-propelled gun capable of repelling tank assaults in fortified areas, mainly the Maginot Line. The tank was a development of the General Garnier with the collaboration of Renault, who based the tank on the Char D3, which was intended to be a colonial version of the Char D1, but failed to be ordered. The tank was developed in the specification of 1933 and tested in May of 1935, where the performance failed to impress the French army. The French army instead went in favor of developing an SPG that would be more suited for the defense and assault, while this one only suited defense. A design from Puteaux was proposed instead, which showed much promise to correct most of the flaws of the ACL-75GR. At the end, it was the model presented by Samua and Ruel who got ordered into production with the 1940 modernization. The SAU-40, and particularly the ARL V39, was the SPG that entered service. The tank definitely didn't lack firepower. The main armament was the 75mm APX 1929, which is the same gun on the SAU-40. It's also centrally mounted, had good gun depression of -10, and also had horizontal traverse limits of 12 degrees. The reload itself was about 5 to 7 seconds, which isn't too bad. And then the major issues for this vehicle was its engine and also its armor capabilities. The top speed of this vehicle was 25 kilometers an hour, which really isn't very good. It also weighed 20 tons and was powered by a 180 horsepower engine. And the protection itself on the front was not very good. The armor on the front only reached 45mm and 35mm on all the sides, basically meaning that a decent field gun would be able to go straight through this thing. It could be able to stop some auto cannon fire, but that would be about it. Then for Sweden, we have the Eldenhet 98, or the Giraffe 1X. Sweden was in need of a new short-ranged anti-air system to replace the aging Robot System 70, which was set to be retired for good in 2016. As Sweden was one of the countries in the IRIST program since 1996, with it entering in service in 2009 as the Jakt Robot 98, the new IRIST SLS caught the attention of the Swedish government. This caused them to order the Swedish Armed Forces, the Försvarsmakten, to procure a new air defense system based on it on the 20th of December 2012. This new system was then named Luftvärnsrobot System 98, which is made up of a firing vehicle, the Eldenhet 98, abbreviated to the Elder 98, and a radar vehicle, the Underrättelseenhet 23, which is abbreviated to the Under 23, and also various command stations. The Eldenhet 98 was first shown to the public with a prototype being flown from Germany to the Malmen Air Base, where it was displayed on the 27th and 28th of August 2016 as the 90th birthday of the Swedish Air Force was celebrated. Later, in 2018, one of the prototype vehicles was loaned by Saab and also Diehl to showcase and modularity of Saab's Giraffe 1X radar at Diehl's exhibition at the ILA 2018 Berlin Air Show, where they showed off their IRIST SL family of systems, making it into a standalone vehicle without the need for a dedicated radar vehicle like the base Elder 98. Later, on the 23rd of August 2019, the Eldenhet 98 system officially entered service, although without the Giraffe 1X radar for this vehicle. The armament on this vehicle has a total of 4 IRIST SLS missiles, which it is able to use, so that is its power. For Israel, we have the CJ5 Tolar. It's the IDF's first technical. The Jeep, or Willys MB, manufactured by Willys Overland, was a light military utility vehicle widely used by the Allies during the Second World War. With an impressive Lend-Lease production of over 600,000 units, that made this nimble little four-wheel drive vehicle its way to every theatre of war. The service of vehicles in the IDF began in 1965, and interestingly, the IDF did not purchase the military version of the Willys, but the civilian CJ5 series. The IDF saw their purchase as a cheap solution to the role of a tank destroyer with their use in hit-and-run tactics. Shortly after their arrival, the vehicles were modified to meet IDF standards. Anti-tank version was armed with a 106mm M40A1 recoilless rifle and given the service name CJ5 Tolar. Tolar is an abbreviation for Totak Lelo Reta, which basically means recoilless cannon. The vehicle participated in the Six-Day War, but since it was just entering production, there were a few of them. They continued to be produced until 1973, with the start of the Yom Kippur War, when the vehicle use was at its peak. The results of the Yom Kippur War showed that the CJ5 Tolar was ineffective, as it had to encounter modern Soviet tanks such as the T-54 or the IS-3, with obsolete armament for that time. Therefore, all CJ5s armed with M40A1 rifles were withdrawn from service after the Yom Kippur War, making their use one of the shortest in IDF history, only 8 years after being put into service for the first time. But, as a brand new BGM-71 tow missile arrived to Israel throughout and after the war as part of military assistance from the United States over the air bridge, the IDF decided to rearm the withdrawn CJ5s with tow missiles, therefore extending their service life under the new name CJ5 OREV. OREV is the IDF's nickname for the tow missile, which in English is Crow. So technically, you could have a version of this thing with an M40A1 recoilless rifle, or even with an ATGM, which might be quite fun. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.